Soak it all in.
He's got nothing to do with masonry. Whoever this black pope is, he's got nothing to do with
I'm just be real with you.
one. Let me speak on the Albert Pike. Let me speak on the Albert Pike quote, because so many people misconstrue what Albert Pike be saying. So many people misconstrue it. Yes, Albert Pike said that. We will not deny that. It is clear as day, and black and white in Morals and Dogma and Albert Pike plagiarized Morals and Dogma 1. Morals and Dogma isn't Albert Pike sitting down writing all this information. Morals and Dogma is Albert Pike researching this, researching that, copying this, copying that. It is not a complete thought from Albert Pike. This is an amalgamation of information from Albert Pike that he got from different people, different occultists here and there. And he put all that stuff together, right? One, yes, the first 3 degrees are deceiving, but it's not deceiving in the sense of one does not know. It is deceiving in the sense of, hey, if you want more information, you need to go further. You need to go into the further degrees to complete the story of masonry. That's what the deception is. You're not complete. You are not a complete Mason at just the 3rd degree.
Freemasonry is just one of many ways to get people into the occult. But even more than that, it's able to get them into a really sort of packaged way to produce people that can be used in a more mechanical way in the system. That is, that they can be put into places of power to turn a lot of the gears and things like that.
If you want to be a complete Mason, you have to go further, whether that be York Rite or Scottish Rite.
Two become one, and then boom, purple. And so again, perfectly aligns with the symbolism we talked about in the first video. But moving on from there, I wanted to talk a bit about some other stuff that I cut from my video to save time, which goes back to the conversation about the Masons. And I talked a lot about their symbolism, especially about their pillar symbolism and the symbolism of their crest. But the thing that I removed and that I really wanted to show you guys involves this graph again. And what you have to keep in mind here is that this chart wasn't made by me or some Joe Schmo. This was actually made by Freemasons for a magazine article. And so think about what you're seeing here. I mean, you have the whole Freemasonic order, which is supposed to be one organization, and it's split right down the middle between the 2 rites of Scottish Rite and York Rite. Well, the Scottish Rite is known, even by many Masons, to be overtly Luciferian. For instance, Albert Pike, the one who wrote positively about Lucifer in Morals and Dogma, was a sovereign grand commander in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. And he even developed many of their rituals that they use to this day. And so my theory here is that each rite represents one of the demiurges. And to start, notice you have the 2 pillars here, and remember the pillars represent the 2 demiurges. Well, each set of steps that represent the 2 different rites, the Scottish and the York, each one has a pillar standing in front of it, likely alluding to the fact that they share the same symbolism in common. And we can even see that many of the ranks on the York Rite side are things that are at least loosely associated with Christianity. For instance, you have the Order of the Red Cross, the Order of the Knights of Malta, and the Order of the Knights Templar, which all 3 of those are actually based on actual Roman Catholic groups. But also you need to keep in mind that with this rank of Knights Templar at the top, unlike every other rank in Freemasonry, this one you actually have to make a profession to be a Christian in order to achieve this rank. But most tellingly of all is that a couple of these figures on the York Rite side are actually associated with the temple of the God of the Old Testament, Adonai. So for instance, you read in the text up there in the top left corner that the Mark Master on the bottom step of the York Rite is actually a temple worker. And then there on the 3rd step, you have the Most Excellent Master. Well, up in the top left corner, it actually calls them a tribesman of Israel, which Israel's the people of God that the God of the Old Testament led out of Egypt. And yet again, if you look on the 6th step of the York Rite, you'll see the Order of the Red Cross, and it tells us that that is actually King Hiram of Tyre, which he's actually the one that helped Solomon build the Temple of the Lord. But the most obvious one is definitely on the 4th step, and it's called the Royal Archmason. And the text in the corner, again, tells us that this is actually the high priest of the Jews. In other words, this represents the high priest of Adonai himself, the one who goes into the temple of Adonai and serves him day and night. And another very telling rank across the way on the Scottish Rite side is the 25th degree called Knight of the Brazen Serpent. So one of the ranks from the Scottish Rite is literally named after a serpent from the Bible. Well, who's the serpent in the Bible? That would be Satan, aka Lucifer. And so again, I think what we have here is two opposed halves that converge at the top of this pyramid-like structure. One half being the Scottish Rite, which represents Lucifer, and the other half being the York Rite, which represents Adonai. And note too that the York Rite side, the Adonai side, is made to appear much harder since it doesn't have the luxury of easy to climb steps. And we also see here the two highest ranks from both the York and the Scottish Rite stand above the whole thing, holding the crest, which again I said represents the merger of Adonai and Lucifer, and again it's branded with that G that refers to the demiurge, the architect. And also let's remember how closely associated both of these top ranks in Scottish and York Rite Masonry are with the two demiurges. Because again, you literally have to be a professing Christian to gain this rank of the Knights Templar. And so that's a forced connection that this Mason has to have to the God of Christianity. Well, just ask any Christian and they'll tell you that their God is the God of the Bible, the whole Bible, including the God of the Old Testament, Adonai. Because Christians obviously accept the God of the Old Testament to be their God, unlike Gnostics. And these people know this. I mean, they're not stupid. They know that. They know that Christians worship the God of the Old Testament and think of him as their God. They think the God of the New Testament and the God of the Old Testament are one and the same. And this is the way they want it. They're not dumb. They know that. And they just want these two ranks to be the embodiment of the two opposed demiurges. Because let's not forget what Albert Pike said about the highest ranks of the Scottish Rite maintaining their religion in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. And notice specifically in his quote that he's only addressing Scottish Rite Masons and not York Rite, because he specifically says in it that he's talking to the Sovereign Grand Inspector General and then also the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degrees. Well, those aren't even in the York Rite, so he's definitely only talking to the Scottish Rite Freemasons here. And also, he really only has any authority in Scottish Rite Freemasonry because he's not a York Rite Freemason. And so yet again, we see that these two separate rites, they're literally polar opposites. One is supposed to honor and admire Lucifer, and the other Adonai, the God of the Bible. And so from seeing all this, it's clear what's going on here. I mean, this final rank is obviously just yet another symbol of the dual demiurge being synthesized here on this top step. And so Masonry is just chock full of this symbolism of the fusion of opposites. You have the two pillars, you have the crest, and now you can see it even comes right down to the two rites that someone can even join. Because one of the rites, the York Rite, seems to be all about the God of Christianity, and the other rite, the Scottish Rite, seems to be all about Lucifer. And yet, in the end, the highest ranks seem to merge at the top here. And so this would seem to imply that at the highest ranks of Freemasonry, these two concepts, these two worldviews are synthesized. They're brought together, and it results in the Gnostic worldview, where you have both Lucifer and the God of Christianity synthesized together to deify man. And that's ultimately why they're showing it on these steps, because it's meant to portray the ascension of man to godhood. It's all about climbing the stairs of heaven, being exalted and going upward. And when you reach this final step, it's when you've achieved apotheosis. And if you think about it, look over there in the top right corner of the picture. You have the all-seeing eye of God, and then around it is the G. Well, Masons will even tell you that the letter G there represents God. And then if you notice, that line that sticks out of the side of it is perfectly in line with that top step, again making the point that when you reach this final step, you're achieving godhood, or gnosis, or exaltation, illumination, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. This is the kind of symbolism that they're trying to portray here. And so obviously the symbolism of the stairs and the eye here, it's pointing to the apotheosis of man. And again, you have to keep in mind here that this final step where you reach apotheosis is where these two opposite sides of the staircase meet. The Scottish Rite and the York Rite. Here's where they merge and become one. And what do you know? That's where apotheosis takes place, at the center of this merger of opposites. And so when it comes to joining Freemasonry while professing to be, quote-unquote Christian or some other religion like Islam or whatever, they allow that because this system is literally put in place to eventually remove those beliefs from the Mason by the end of this whole process. Because you see, it doesn't matter to them. They see all these gods like Allah or Adonai or Krishna or whoever else as just another portrayal of the demiurge. But they've literally created this type of system to draw in people from whatever religion and lead them inexorably upward to the enlightenment that their God and Satan are actually two halves of the same whole, and that by merging the two, man can reunite with God and become God. And so obviously there's an illusion of freedom when it comes to religion and creed, but really the goal of the system is to remove such things and to eventually initiate the Mason into this Gnostic worldview. And before I leave the topic of Freemasonry, I actually want to play this clip for you guys out there who still have your doubts about Freemasonry having connections to Gnosticism. And really quick for background on this clip, the speaker is Dr. James White, and he's actually a church historian. He teaches church history on a scholarly level, and he's not really into this kind of conspiracy theory stuff that we're talking about here, so he's not really a biased source. And so what he says here is purely based on historical facts, and not at all biased by what we're talking about.
Gnostic. It's from the Greek term gnosis, which means knowledge. They taught that salvation came through obtaining secret knowledge, which was offered through the various rites and rituals of their religion. Basically, you were taught that you were a spark of the divine, and that being reabsorbed back into the divine and the loss of your own personality really was your truest goal. But this was only meant for the enlightened. This was information that was not meant for the hoi polloi, the people of the land, but was only for the initiated ones, and you obtained it by going through Masonic-like rituals and ordinances and things like that. So that's the origination of the term. You obtained it by going through Masonic-like rituals.
And so hopefully you can see from that clip that there are really connections between the modern Freemasons and the ancient Gnostics. I mean, it basically seems like the Gnostics realized that they had lost the battle against the Christian church, and so they just revamped their entire system, renamed themselves, and made their doctrines even more esoteric and secret. But before I close here, I want to remind you guys of the solution to all of this darkness that we just went over, and that is the cross of Christ. Because it's one thing to sit back and shake our fist at this darkness that's going on, but even these individuals behind all this, they need to be saved out of it, because the true conspiracy behind all this is a spiritual one, and our enemies are demonic in nature, not human. And so really, if you think about it, in that way, these people are victims. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're sinners, they've brought this on themselves, but also in a way they're being used. And so really, the only way to come against something spiritual like this is with a spiritual response, a spiritual message, and that message is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I mean, it's simple. In fact, it's too simple. It's so simple that people like this, they want something more complex. They're not satisfied with the simplicity of the gospel. They don't want grace. They want to earn their salvation from God. They want to make God their debtor. They want to earn salvation from Him and put Him in a place where He owes them, because that exalts them. That makes them think highly of themselves when they can make the great and glorious God owe them something. And so really they think of the gospel of Christianity as being too simple. And so instead they want something more complex that requires, the study of ancient pagan religions and, every esoteric occult idea ever to try and save themselves. But come on, man. If you're so smart, why can't you just see the ridiculousness of that? I mean, look how weak and fragile we are. Look how weak you are. You can't even save yourself from choking on like a piece of gum, let alone from eternal death. I mean, how could you possibly believe that? It's counterintuitive even. No, you need to be saved. You need another to do what you can't do, because you know deep down that you're sinful and evil, and you think evil things every single day. And so you need someone else to take your punishment for all the wrong that you continuously keep on doing. And I mean, what do you think? That doing good now is going to erase what you've done in the past? That's absurd. And besides that, you can't even be good enough now either. I mean, you think an infinite being like God, who is absolutely perfect, would accept your best deeds as being good? No way, man. He's perfect, and his standards are infinitely higher than yours. And so what you really need is someone else's goodness credited to your account. Someone whose deeds do satisfy the perfection of God. And so what you need is the atoning death and righteousness of Jesus Christ, because he's the only one who's ever lived up to God's perfect standard. Because he is God, wrapped in flesh. And he came and he bore the curse of your evil upon himself so you wouldn't have to. He became your sin so that you could become his righteousness. And the thing is with this, you don't have to work your fingers to the bone to have access to this. You don't have to search and search and search. It's always been there right in front of you. Wouldn't you expect that from the Creator who loves you? That's what he would do. He would placard it right in front of your face and make it plain and clear as day. And he wouldn't make it all about you and you having to accomplish all these different things in order to earn salvation from him. No, all you have to do is run to Christ like a child runs into the arms of their father when they're in need of help. You just have to give up on trying to save yourself by your own knowledge and efforts and wisdom and gnosis, and trust in the all-wise God to save you. Let him be your gnosis. And if you let go of your prideful grasp on your own goodness and your own deeds and your own knowledge and wisdom and all those things, and you clutch on to Christ, you hold on to him and trust in him and his work alone, apart from anything else to save you, and he will credit to your account the righteousness that only God incarnate could merit. And if you'd like to hear more about the saving power of Jesus' gospel, I would encourage you to watch my most recent gospel video.
That's all that is saying.
Okay, so
That's it.
This right here is a Masonic Lodge in Oklahoma. I can go to my mentor and get the exact one at a later point. But yeah, this right here.
What is
Right
that
here.
lodge? What does that lodge do with anything?
In this Masonic Lodge, the mentor was able to go in and get a picture of this that was on the window.
What is that?
IHS. You know,
Is that an apple?
What does that mean?
Isis.
It looks like an apple.
Isis, horse, and set. I mean, you guys may have a different meaning for it, but in the occult world, Isis, horse, and set. But this also points back to the Jesuit order because they use the same symbol. The Jesuits use the same symbol. I can show
But
you.
who are the
This was
Jesuits
in the
though?
Catholic
'Cause
Church.
tell me who the Jesuits are, because I'm unfamiliar with them. I've heard about them, but I'm not fluent.
Okay, I'll read that off to you real quick. So
Jesuits also use crosses, but Christianity uses crosses.
whoa, that's you see that you're kind of falling into Noble's rabbit hole because he tried to say that we use witchcraft and all other stuff. That's not the case because the
I'm
only
not saying Christianity. You know, I will never say Christianity uses witchcraft. But what I'm saying is, just because a symbol is used does not mean you can say that it's used in the same liken as another group.
Yeah,
Crosses were
look,
used by multiple religions, societies, orders. But we cannot say Christianity is witchcraft because this organization uses a cross as well.
yeah, because
No, they
Catholics,
have two different meanings.
don't
That's not
Catholics use the
fair.
cross?
Catholics use many different types of crosses.
See,
But
that's
they
what I'm
use the
saying.
cross.
But do they use the cross? That's like the Ankh, though. The Ankh
No,
is
but they use many different types of cross. They have a bent cross. They have a twisted cross. There is
But it's still a cross.
It's
at
the
end of
only
day.
still a cross, though.
No,
It's
That's what I'm saying.
that's a dead lie, bro. That's a dead lie. And you follow.
So you're telling me on Catholics do not have necklaces or depictions of Jesus Christ on the cross in their churches.
They do, and the Bible says not to do that. So that doesn't make it any better just because they're trying to praise Jesus. Because he said,
But
Okay,
there are Christian
that-
churches that do it that are outside of Catholicism.
But
So
that's
are
what
they
we
wrong
said
too?
about masonry, though.
yes. I'm
But
not
that's what we
just
said about
specifically saying-
masonry. Just because they doing something different, don't means that we all doing it. Like
Well, that's right.
Okay,
that's what we
I'm-
saying.
I'm
Right,
gonna read
right.
this- I'm gonna read this oath to you, Jay Smoothie, and this is just not the one oath. This is just a partial of it, and this is from the Library of Congress catalog, card number 66-43354, and this is their oath. You have been taught to insidiously plant the seed of jealousy and hatred between communities and provinces and states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of of blood involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in countries that were independent and prosperous, cultivating the arts and the sciences and enjoying the blessings of peace. To take sides with your brother Jesuit who might be engaged on the other side, but openly opposed to that which you might be connected. Only that the church might be the gainer in the end. In the conditions it fixed in the treaties for peace, and that the end justifies the means. Now, I just want to show you something. What they mean by is your brother Jesuit might be on the opposing side is that he might be a Lutheran at the moment, or he might be a Mason at the moment, and he has to play his role because that's what he is taught to do. Only that the church might be the gainer. Now,
to society.
Does the church, though, or the Council of Bishops, Father, make any reference to the fact that we bring more than 3 million people a year into the United States legally, that we made more than 1 million people, U.S. citizens, naturalized, more than 1 million immigrants last year as U.S. citizens, that almost half of them were Hispanic? Because you make it sound as if there's some sort of constraint here to do things legally. We had a president running around for 8 years saying things like we need a guest worker program. We have 13 of them in this country. Why the duplicity? Why the deceit? Why the obfuscation in this debate rather than clarity and transparency, openness and honesty?
Well, I would like to see a program that actually worked. I mean, it can take 20 years for someone to get a visa to rejoin their families. This is just not a system that's working. What we need is a system that actually works, that allows people to get a visa, come here legally, and allows the, 10 million people who are here already, that have been living here, that have children born in the United States. There are 3.1 million children who were born in the United States of people who are here undocumented. They are American citizens. The government is threatening to take their parents away from them and send it back to the country they lived in. These are children who are American citizens.
You didn't answer a single question I asked, Father, but then again, you're a Jesuit. You can get away with that. Father.
Yes, I'd like to comment on a false statement that my good brother Priest made, and he's a wonderful guy, I know that. And that is, he made the statement, which I'm almost horrified to hear because it's so untrue. But it's part of the, part of the language of people who hold this view. And that is...
Also, it's a part of the oath that I can't show because it talks about how they will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle the infamous heretics who go against them. And they said that they will take down any kingdom, any Protestant, any liberal, conservative, whatever you may be, if you go against what they are trying to push. And I
ask you a question?
Can I finish real quick? And I can show you how people in high society who have trainers like Denzel Washington, his trainer, do you know who his trainer was? A Jesuit. Do you want to know people like, what's her name? Whitney Houston, Jay-Z, all these big top people, they have Jesuit people next to them.
Yeah, but dude, let me ask you this.
I'm saying like they have
everybody, right? That's non-Jesuit. Are you a Jesuit?
No, and I don't have to be to understand them.
Well, no, I'm just saying. So that creed, they talking against you and anybody that's against them. So that's what I'm saying. Like, when we think about what these people really saying and what's going on, man, we got to look at, okay, do they identify with the Most High? Do they identify with His teachings and everything like that? Anybody that doesn't identify with the Most High, His teachings, if you are against that, then if your sword is against the Most High word and His people, my sword is against you. It don't matter if you is a Mason or not. That's just me though. That go for anybody that exists. If your sword is against the Father and His Son and His Word, my sword is against you. So, you feel what I'm saying? At the end of the day.
Well, did Vincent have something to say?
I was honestly just gonna ask because it kind of took me back by a second. You said that there was part of their oath that you wouldn't read out of respects to them, for a better lack of words. But as I'm listening and watching, I don't think you're paying our organization that same respects when we're being respectful, but you're protecting an organization that you're not a part of that is against you as an individual, especially being a Christian.
If we being honest, I haven't really shown any type of oath that you guys have. Because, by the way, I just want to say that I've already had Masons confirm to some of the oaths that I have in my phone that I can show.
No Mason is going to confirm an oath to you. I'm looking at it now.
Vincent, I'm telling you with all
Nah, Vince, he telling the truth because I had to check some brothers.
Okay. Thank you, Jay Smoothie, for telling him that I'm not lying. If I don't have the information, or if I don't have the say so, I'm not going to say anything about it. But what I'm saying is, like I said, they already confirmed to it the Royal Arch and many other different degrees, or whatever you want to call them. So, like I said, with all due respect, I am showing you respect because I haven't shown not one of those. Have I, Jay Smoothie? Or Asura? Have I shown one? I just showed
the grips is disrespectful. The grips are. Well,
honestly, I can't really say much about that because I have a whole bunch of people in high society in my phone who are doing it.